Okay. Right. Hey everyone, how you doing? I'm just going to check that this audio is working. Right, so are we in sync with the audio or not? Hey everyone, how you doing? I'm just going to check that this audio is working. Oh, it is. Okay, great. Welcome, Patch, Stephen, Cal, and the Wanderer. How are you all? So are we in sync with the audio or not? Yes, we are. How you doing? I'm just going to check that this audio is working. Okay. Hello, Axel. How are you, mate? I left a message on your phone the other day. Good that you've tuned in. I haven't seen any of the dolphins up here for a while, but we have a very full river, so it's just starting to head out to the ocean again on the low tide. So we've missed the high tide peak, but that's all right. We'll hopefully still get some fish. So, welcome everyone. Thanks to everyone that's tuned in. Oh, a little bit of lag there. So we have a new giveaway now. I'm pretty sure it's !real. So let's try it. Try and just type, if someone can please type in !real into the chat, and it should hopefully bring up the entry into the new giveaway for the free sport reel. Let's see how we go. I don't want to enter it, obviously, as I'm doing the giveaway. Hello, Kyle. How are you, bud? Welcome, mate. Thanks, Kyle. Let's see if that's working. Oh, dear. Hang on. Has it come up? No. Of course not. What's this signed in on? All right, so complete. There's no giveaway. I will sort this out tomorrow. Anyway. Yeah, sorry about that. I don't know what's going on, people. I had to go back to the worst streaming app in the world today, and this is exactly why I don't like using it, but I will sort something out for Stream Elements tomorrow. So, Today we're going to be doing a live stream on how to fish rivers, and what I'm going to be doing is going through various tackle and various techniques on how to do that. We're going to keep it pretty low key. As you're well aware, we don't really like too much hype on the channel, and what I'm going to do is just show you the differences in techniques, if we have enough time, between bait fishing, which everyone usually starts out with, either with a hand line or a rod and reel if they can afford it. Okay, then on top of that, what we're going to be doing is using lures. So we'll get some soft plastics and some hard body lures. I'll show you how to fish those. Soft plastics, lures and soft plastics are two different beasts, so we'll treat them as two different topics. Okay, and then on top of that, what I'll do is, if we have time, we'll do the fly fishing, but we'll just have to see how we go for time on that. Okay, yes, so welcome everyone. Let's just get into this. Now, does everybody know how to balance their fishing tackle? Which is a serious question. Yeah, they can, Kyle, in freshwater, not so much in saltwater and estuary. Not that I've ever fished with small spinners for brim that much. Might try that though. We'll see if freshwater spinners can catch brim for us, okay? So I'm just going to put these down over here. Yep, someone's been fishing here. Okay. Right. Let me just grab another charger. Like that. That's beautiful. Hey Steve, how are you, bud? Yeah, it's pretty good, Steve. When we first moved across from the other platform, we streamed here last year. So we've caught and released last winter before we released about, I would say, at least 50 brim. So all good. Now, with your fishing rods, okay, when it comes to bait fishing and when it comes to soft plastic fishing, usually there is a distinct difference. So a 6 foot fishing rod or a 5'6" fishing rod, 6 foot, 7 foot, 8 foot, 9, 10 foot, if I cast them into the water and start retrieving with my rod tip vertical, the lures that you use will come in at different angles, okay? With bait fishing, because it's mainly, hooking the fish and then, should have brought the Aerogard, hooking the fish and then locking up straight away and wrestling it through, Height of the fishing rod is not really as much of a concern because you're not going to be throwing a bait around like a lure, okay? Most of your soft plastic rods are all 7 foot long. This is an Abu Veritas. This is the 7 foot 2 inch one piece ultralight. So it's rated for 1 to 3 kilo line and 2 to 8 gram lures. But in actual fact, it's probably a little bit tougher than that, okay? But for the soft plastics, this is the rod that I've been predominantly using for the mulloway and what have you, which was paid for by Tundra Cowboy. So this is just a normal Shimano Katana, 5 foot 6 two piece. So this is a, no, this is a 6 foot two piece, is it? Ooh, okay, 6 foot two piece. It's rated for 2 to 4 kilo, but it's actually, yeah, a little bit heavier than that, okay? And I mean, don't get me wrong, you can still use this soft plastic rod for bait fishing, but in saying that, what may end up happening is when you need to have that initial hookup with the bait, boom, you might have a bit too much tip in it, and it can sometimes spit the hook. So, now, with balancing your fishing tackle, okay, the only way to balance your fishing tackle is to put your rod on your reel. We'll do it this way. We'll put the old Warhorse on here. Now these are two very similar looking reels. Different weights. This one's much heavier than the Penn. This is one of your old Warhorse type reels, okay? So, to balance a fishing rod, put your reel on your rod, and what it should do, ideally, if it's balanced properly, it'll balance where the line roller here or the top of the spool is in line with the rod. So basically what I can do is I can stand here all day, hold that in that spot there, and it should have little weight impact on, or fatigue on you when you're fishing with it, because that's its balance point, okay? So what you would do is, if you wanted to use the same reel for lures, that's where you would hold the rod, and that's where you'll get your best leverage and all that sort of stuff. Because if you try to do it here, it won't feel the same. Try and do it here, it won't feel the same. Normally what I do is I always have 2 fingers above the reel seat, 2 fingers below it, the thumb on the back, and then that way when you go to cast, this pointy finger will guide the rod back, and then you push with your thumb. Okay, a lot of people make the mistake of trying to flick fishing rods. Don't do that, cast it, okay? Nice smooth acceleration to a stop, boom, and then that way, away you go. So, what we'll do first up is we'll get a couple of baits going, and I'll show you a couple of different ways, okay? Steve, most rivers in Australia are tidal, so the level of this river will increase and decrease according to the current. So, what will happen is, as the river fills up with salt water, you'll generally find that the fish may well get pushed upstream with it. Then as the river starts to empty, when it heads out back towards the ocean, they'll come down with the seam, as they call it, with the salt and the fresh meats. So normally what will happen, because this is an estuary type waterway, you'll have salt on the bottom, fresh on the top, and you'll have it mixed in the middle. This foam here indicates that the water that I'm fishing is salty. You know, sometimes when you go freshwater fishing or saltwater fishing, it looks like someone's dumped detergent in the river and you see all these little suds coming up. That means that your water's salty, okay? So, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put this little Battle 3 2,500 on this 7-footer, and that's pretty well balanced as well, okay? This is actually a lighter rod than the shorter Shimano, and that's a much lighter reel than the Qualia. So basically what we have here is we have a nice little combo that's balanced. When you're casting once every, I don't know, you're probably casting 6 times in every 5 minutes with soft plastics. You want to make sure that you've got a rod that's balanced, okay, and you can use it and get accustomed to it. A lot of people make the mistake every season, they'll go out and buy heaps of fishing rods and all the rest of it so they can brag. It's really hard to get accustomed to a fishing rod unless you use it all the time. You want to be able to pick up a fishing rod, look where you want to cast, and then boom, and be able to, you know, judge how much effort you need, what point you want to let the line go, what lures, etc., 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 to try and cast it within a sort of dessert dish of where you're aiming for, okay? And there's a very good analogy from golf that stands true for fishing. Okay, so driving's for show, putting's for dough. Doesn't matter how far you cast, but if you can't cast to within that at a target, you know, you need to go and practice or take up a new sport, okay? Yeah, so that's basically what it is. Now, with all your fishing, right, especially bait fishing, there's two types of rigs out there, okay? And I'm not going to be overly specific with it, but I'm just going to save you the headaches. You've got two types of rigs, doesn't matter whether it's saltwater, whatever, right? And even your live baiting, sorry, not light baiting, you can use the light when you do the live baiting. Even with your live baiting, it's the same, but there's only really one sort of rig that you use. So, there's two types of rigs. There's one rig where you have the sinker at the end, right? So your baits are between you and the sinker, or you have the bait at the end and you have the sinker between you and the bait, right? Whatever you do, don't let your sinkers slide down to the hook, because if we try and translate that to a human equivalent, if every time I went to eat food, if I shoved my boot in your face, you probably wouldn't be too hungry. Okay, fish are the same, alrighty? A lot of times when I was younger and learning about how to fish, I got taught with the, you know, the sinker sliding down to the hook because they didn't know any better. As soon as I tied a swivel and had the sinker sliding down to the swivel, my catch rate went up 30%. Then I changed from right hand retrieve to left hand retrieve. My catch rate went up about another 20%, okay? And then braid was invented, catch rate just went through the roof, okay? So there's little things that you can do along the way that just make life easier for you. And once you use a technique and you start to catch fish on it, don't go backwards to the old one. Just stick to the new one that you know. You've got to have confidence in your knots. Your knots are what join you to your fish. So if there's one thing I can suggest, and that is just make sure you spend a lot of time paying attention to your knots, okay? All right, now, hey Cal. No, don't use swivel clips, Steve, especially on hard-bodied lures. I will show you that later. Swivel clips, no. What you do, even with lures, it's best to join your braid to a swivel, leave yourself about 30 to 40 centimetres and use a loop knot on the front of your lure. And that's the same for your soft plastics. Okay, because when you've got such a small, some bibs on lures, right, are the size of your like fingernail here. If you've got a swivel in front of it, that's going to affect water flow, and it's also going to make noise when you retrieve it. Okay, so little things like that that make all the difference. So once again, with braid too, braid doesn't have the same abrasion resistance that monofilament does. So when you're chasing big fish, I'm hoping that we can live stream from a river spot down south one day. And if I can live stream from this spot on the Warren River, I'll show you quite a few different freshwater techniques. And if you're fishing for larger fish with bigger spinners, usually brown trout and reddies will head straight for structure. If they wrap your braid around structure, it's off straight away. But I call it the insurance leader. If you've got this much fluorocarbon or monofilament, just that little bit of insurance to ensure, okay, that your fish, even if it wraps you around structure, will have monofilament to rub against the structure rather than braid. So your chances of landing the fish go up a lot more, you know? I don't know the exact number, but anyway. Okay, so what we're going to do now, right, is let's do a rig up. I'll show you a really basic rig. once again, don't get wrapped up in spending massive dollars on fluorocarbon, people. This is 15-pound Schneiderline. It's not fluorocarbon, okay? It's quite thick for its size. We catch plenty of brim on this, people. Right, we don't even need to really worry about it, okay? I mean, oops. So this spool of 20-pound fluorocarbon is about $12. There's 50 metres on there. This is 500 metres of 15-pound Schneider, and I think that cost me $7 more. So, you know, if you're going to be fishing in really snaggy areas, fishing line becomes a consumable, fam. Okay? Now, right, we'll need that for later, and we'll need that for later. Excellent. So what I'm going to do here is just going to grab, yeah, that's all we need. This is like my little, like whiting brim box, okay, and my freshwater box, all right? Now, one mistake that people make when they use terminal tackle, right, is the terminal tackle they use is a lot stronger and a lot heavier than the line they're using. This can cause you headaches with twist. Okay, so let's put that back there. Let's bring this in here. Remember to get my hooks out. No, of course I didn't. Now, okay. If you want to catch every single fish that's swimming out there, use hooks in size 6 or 4. Okay, some people even use 8. I don't like doing that, especially as a content creator, because, well, as a fisher person too, because all you're doing there is you're virtually cutting your nose off to spite your face, because, you know, it's a bit hard to catch fish if you've kept everything, which a lot of people do. And I mean, black brim are the one species of fish, like snapper and juvenile snapper in inlets. I mean, inlets and rivers are usually your nurseries for the larger fish species. With brim, it's their habitat. But unfortunately, you know, when brim are hungry and they're on the bite, you can catch them on practically anything, okay? And because of that, numbers have, you know, diminished, which is a bit of a pain. But a lot of people like to take from waterways stuff, but they very rarely like to give back, okay? So let me just get this line through this reel. And the one thing that I really dislike seeing is, you know, someone will go to Twitter, hey, I caught 5 brim during my lunch break, you know, and it's like, well done, mate. Why don't you just catch and release 5, right? You know what I mean? And it's just ridiculous. Tends to us sort of, you know, get a bit annoyed because brim numbers have diminished dramatically since the 80s and the 90s, people, you know. I don't know what we're down to, but it's not much, you know. All right, so, yeah, I hear, hey, Phil, I hear you, Steve, but that's you and I, my friend, and most of the people in this community. With a lot of other people, yeah, it's like a brag fish, you know. Oh, look at the size of the brim I caught. And it's like, mate, great, why don't you let it go? Because they get to about, look, with black brim in Western Australia, the colder the water gets, the longer they take to reach maturity. So in the Swan River, which is a bit hotter, and say even the Murchison, I think they grow from that to 18 centimetres in about 2.5 years. As you head further down south around to Albany, that's 3.5, 4 years, okay? But once they sort of reach that small 18, 20 centimetre size, their growth rate is really slow. I mean, we've caught and released 45 or 46 or 47 centimetre brim from this spot. A fish that size is easily over 30 years old. And then you have all these morons, and I will use that term not loosely, but, you know, oh, don't believe what you read. And it's like, well, pal, you know, they've spent a lot of time doing the science on this and the research, you know, and they are, they just don't get it, you know, they don't get it. So, okay, now, when you're fishing for bream, get yourself a hook out, okay, because they do have a tendency to swallow the hook. If you're going to use braid, get yourself a little pair of braid scissors. Now what I've done here is I've put a monofilament or fluorocarbon shock leader on my reel, okay. It's about 1.5 times the length of the rod. Now in terms of sinkers and that sort of stuff, what you need to do is you need to use a sinker that is heavy enough for your bait to stay put on the bottom. Now, don't know whether you can see it over the other side, but we do have the water sort of going back out. So what's going to happen is, I'm going to show you a big mistake that people make when they use bream rigs too, okay? And the main mistake is when they cast, and I'll show you why in a minute. So what we'll do, to fish this sort of waterway today, it's not too bad. So I'm going to start off with the second largest sinker that I have in the little multi-pack of bean sinkers here. Okay, so it's quite simple. And what we're going to do is this, we're going to put that through there. This is about a 30-pound breaking strain swivel. I've got 20-pound leader and 20-pound braid. So that's about the right size. Now that looks really small. You'd be very hard pressed to find a fish that could snap that. I always wrap my line around 7 times, okay, to set the knot. Right, now, when you do your knots like that, don't try and get it right down too close to the actual knot itself, right? Always leave yourself like 1 or 2 mil, because what will happen is when you put it under tension, then that's when it will basically pull properly, okay, and then set. You can do it so much yourself, but you know, once there's a lot more water around the knot and resistance, and that's when you know. Okay, so this is just the improved clinch knot, 7 times around the line, in through that loop there, back through the main loop. Form the knot, little bit of spittle. See how I'm not yanking on the line really tight? Okay, come on. Maybe I should have. Right. So, and that's the knot that I use for hooks, swivels, whatever, okay? And then when I want to do a little sinker down the bottom of my rigs, I'll do a loop knot, okay? Lockie, how are you, bud? Welcome to the stream. Now, some people like to use snells. I don't mind snells, but years ago I lost a really big fish that bit the shank of the hook when it took it in, and what it did, it unraveled the snell. So now I just use the improved clinch knot and have done for 30 odd years. So, right, once again, so that's your basic rig. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to cast this, and I want everybody to pick the mistake. Okay? Watch. Okay, so what's the mistake that I'm going to do here? What's the mistake that I did, everyone? And remember, there's no such thing as a stupid question or suggestion, just ask. So what do you think was the mistake there? I'll get the bait ready while you're figuring that out. Okay, the mistake that I did there was when I cast it, right, I just cast it and let it go. A lot of people, when they'll cast, they'll flick, right? So what'll happen is you'll drive the sinker into the water hits the sinker, and then the sinker virtually stops what it's doing, and then the bait will hit the sinker, right? And it'll tangle. Now, when you've got a sinker between you and your bait, right? You must always grab the spool just before the sinker hits the water, because what that'll do is that'll tension the line will straighten, the sinker will pull on the line, and then your bait will flick out. And what'll happen is, as soon as that happens, you let go with your hand on the spool, and your sinker will hit the water, okay, and your bait's already laid out behind it. So what'll happen is the sinker will hit and the bait will just be following behind the bait. Quite often, a bream or a herring or a whiting will hit the bait as it's dropping down because they're accustomed to feeding on stuff that falls out of trees and that sort of stuff, okay? Now, no, not at all, Steve. Now, this is a muley tail, right? So, this is what we're going to do. I'll show you. See how that's got the backbone of the fish in the middle? A lot of people bait incorrectly. As a rule of thumb, whenever you're putting a bait on, always try and go through the bait twice. So check this out. That's your muley, there's the backbone, there's the hook. So the first one is going to go in towards the tail, underneath the backbone. See where that's gone through? And then what you do, like a needle, you bring it up through here, you go over the backbone with the bend of the hook. And see that there? What I've got there is I've got the bend of the hook over the backbone of the fish, so therefore the bait can't pull off even if it's a softer bait. See that? Okay, and what we've got is we've got a beautifully presented bait. What we can see is the eye and the point of the hook there, and then we've got the bend of it underneath, so it's pretty well concealed. And I've also got the tail covering the knot up here. So let's see if there's a fish out there. Okay, remember, just before it hits the water, right, you've got to grab your spool. Now, we know that there's a snag over there, but this is the first cast of this reel I've had since last season. I also know that there's a snag in here. So what I'm going to do is, remember, driving's for show and putting's for dough. So I'm trying to cast as close to the snag as possible. Now, if you've got a high tide, right, and just say the snag's here, with a high tide, if you're on the side of the river where the water's flowing from left to right, what you want to do is, I've got about 50 centimetres of monofilament on this rig, okay? So what I need to do is I need to cast this sinker 50 centimetres away from the target that I'm aiming for, okay? And then what'll happen is, when the water grabs your bait, which is what water does, water grips, okay? And with the friction, it'll grab your bait and it'll swing it around. So if I cast with the sinker directly on the target, it'll wrap around the target because you need shade and structure. So over that other side of the river, we've got structure and shade. That's where I'm going to try and cast for, and in here. So think about it. If I've got, where I am on this side of the river, if I was on the other side, it'd be opposite. So I've got the tide coming in this way, right? I don't want to cast directly at my target sort of upstream, because the bait will go into the snag and get wrapped around. Correspondingly, at this stage with the low tide, because the water's going out to the ocean on the low tide, I want to cast to the right of my structure. So when the sinker sits in the water and grips the bottom and the bait swings round, you want that bait to get as close to the structure as possible without touching it. Okay? And then a lot of people, when they cast for brim, they cast in the wrong spot. That's why they don't catch anything. Because if you've got the snag here, right, and we've got the tide going out and I cast here, the bait's going to flick out away from the snag. So I need to cast to the right of the snag so the bait can flick around and, you know, torment the fish to take the bait. So first things first, what I'm going to do a little short range cast, right? And I'm just going to cast at this little snag in here. Now watch what the hand, I'll show you that with the thing on the, there, boom. So I've grabbed that and I've pulled it back, and what I've done there is, that's a pretty good cast actually. So what I've done is, my sinker is about, I would say, 60 centimetres from the snag, and because the water's going that way, what'll happen is that's bait will go straight into the snag now. So positioning is very important. Now the other thing is too, right, you've got to remember your local fishing laws. I get very frustrated when I see people with 6, 8 or 10 fishing rods out with baits on them. If you get a decent fish, it's going to go through all your lines, right? And all you're doing is you're cutting your nose off to spite your face. So if you're going to fish lures and soft plastics, cast out a bait, leave it, forget about it. The only time you need to worry about it is when the rod's taking off like a javelin straight for the river, and you've got the brim of a lifetime on the end of it, okay? And then what you do, muck around with your soft plastics, but always have one eye on what the rod's doing, because many fish have been lost like that, okay? So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to put this down over here. I don't know where. I'm going to set the drag. Now, hear that boat? That's the other reason why I haven't done a long range cast, okay? I'm just going to zoom out a bit. Does that make sense? Yeah, that's what you got to remember. So, yeah, that's your classic, go mate. That's your classic brim fisho. Centre console, 14 foot long, outboard on the back, and all this is going to do is stir it up, which is not a bad thing. Okay, now a lot of people go, "Yeah, he's making this, don't worry about it, fish don't care." This is good. What it's going to do is, when I go along in the boat, it's going to do everything. Okay, and if you like to fish harbours, right, what you do is, with harbours and that sort of stuff, you can find out the list of when boats are leaving, okay? Those big propellers they have on the bottom of their boats and that sort of stuff, normally in most harbours, they'll stir up the bottom. When they reverse out and then they shoot off or whatever, that's when a lot of big mulloway, snapper and sharks go in, right? And that's the best time to fish them. We got a fish. First cast of the season. All right. We had a bite then, and the little bugger. All right. So that's caught a snag on the way back. All right. So there's fish down there. So, oh yeah, look at that. Look at that. That's the classic brim take, fam. Okay, that's the classic brim take. See how it's just smashed that? Right, so what we're going to do is, we're going to use the same bait. I'm going to put it back in exactly the same spot. Right, I'm going to push it a bit further through on the hook then, and this time I'm going to hold it. Okay. Great. Okay, so there's a fish there, right? Now, a lot of people say, yeah, you know, with the brim, let it go, all the rest of the stuff. Me personally, as soon as I feel the bite, I usually with brim, I'll go boom, 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 and then boom, boom, boom again. I'll wait for the second one and then I'll set the hook, right? So that was definitely a fish then, so we'll just wait. Okay, and look, once you figure out how to fish for brim, don't change it, because if something's not broken, right, don't try and fix it, okay? So come on, little fella. Excuse me. And like I said to you, what we'll do now is, if we get a fish on the bait, we'll leave the bait out there. I haven't heard too many boats built upstream, even though the water's going out, it's heading that way, right? So what we'll do is we'll just put a longer cast out with the bait, right? And then what we'll do is we'll use a few soft plastics, give you a quick little like demo on how soft plastics work, all right? Now, your most important thing when you've got a bait in the water is watch your line. Right, this is why so many people fish with fluoro-coloured lines. Your fishing line, as well as being your join to your fish with your hook, your swivel, your leader, rudder, right? The fishing line's a very important tool because it'll tell you that there's a fish on your line and bitten the hook, right, before the rod tip going off tells you. Okay, now I've given this a little bit of slack, right? So I'm just waiting to see what's going to happen. But we're going to be spending a lot of time here. In Western Australia, winter is brim fishing time. Winter is one of the few times you'll catch all the really big fish. But you've got to remember, most of the really big fish that you catch in winter are the breeding stock, right? Yeah, I've seen brim caught in a river down south that were like the size of sort of smallish salmon, right? And okay, so I've just had a little bit of a nudge on that line there. Resist the strike early, okay? Now there is a scientific condition for that. For those, you know, when you see these people that go, ooh, fish, and they ooh, like that, you know, and they, ooh, I've lost it. Walk up to them and go, look, that's actually a scientific condition. It's called premature hookulation, okay? No cure for it. But anyway, so what we'll do, and the other thing is too, once your bait's in the water, don't move the rod around like a tennis racket. Just leave it to do its own thing, okay? I've had friends that have gone underwater with snorkel and goggle and they've seen brim swimming around baits, right? Or right up to baits, and they've just sat there. Then out of nowhere, they just go boom and take it, you know? I don't think that was a very big fish, judging by the crushing plates. See, I'm keeping the fishing rod and reel like a statue. I'm not even moving it. Okay, there is absolutely no tension on this line at the moment, none at all. Okay, a lot of people when they fish for brim, they'll reel it in and they have the rod bent and it's really tense and that. A lot of you bigger fish, from my experience, and remember when we stream people, I'm only sharing with you my experience and these are my opinions and no one else's, right? A lot of the bigger fish, as soon as they feel that bit of tension, they just drop it straight away. And I mean, sometimes, you know, they'll try and pick up a bait and swim off with it. If you've got too much tension on your line, they'll just drop it straight away, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open my bail arm. I'm just going to open my bail arm to move. Right, I'm going to all along here. Okay, that. Sometimes with brim, especially the big ones, you can see your line pulse. It's like it's going forwards, backwards, you know. And right. Okay, so is that good? Cal, how you going? We good? Zed, how are you, bud? Sorry about that, people, but the streaming gods didn't smile favourably upon us. Righto, now what we need to do is we need to do a longer cast. So it's quite simple. Because I need to do a longer cast, I'm going to put a heavier sinker on there, but audio. So okay, that is going to swing around the bait and go straight into that snag. And remember, when you're casting with that sort of rig, okay, you're not casting the bait, you're casting the sinker, right? So focus on the sinker when you're casting.